Celestrio's third set, Daybreak, just came out and introduces a brand new mechanic in the game called Foretell. Foretell is where you reveal X number of cards off the top of your deck and then replace them in any order. This set's cover card, Celestleo, and the new element Solar revolve around the Foretell mechanic to create an overwhelming card advantage. Today we're going to look at the new mechanic and the Solar cards themselves. Starting things off is our primary win con. 3 copies of Nebuleo and 2 Celestleo. Nebuleo has a once per turn Foretell 4 that then adds any copies of itself, its ascended forms, and first light into hand. Similar to Tectaris, it gains an additional attack for each Solar enchanted on the field, helping it overcome the deck's biggest weakness in bigger Celestrals. It then adds any foretold Solar Celestrals into your hand and then destroys cards onto the field up to the number of added Solars. It's our deck's primary win condition and helps maintain advantage with its effect. We're not running Leo Bright, the 2-drop member of its family, because I don't think it does enough for its cost compared to its family members. While Neb and Celeste both add cards to hand, Leo Bright only really searches for Celestleo and doesn't help otherwise. If you really feel the need to run it, I would suggest 1 at the most. Next up we have 3 copies of Soul Bell. On top of a solid 4 defense, this card makes our Apollo go from a Foretell 3 into a Foretell 5, allowing us to search through 1/8 of our deck every turn. Being able to look at the top 5 cards of our deck and place them in any order we want is a very nice resource advantage. We're not running Soul Stalks because it's a 2-drop beater and I don't think it fits into this particular build, but at the end of the video we'll cover a second build that I do think that card fits better into. Next we have 3 copies of Exaltus, an Insane Searcher and Nexus Enabler. It can search for any Ethereal Celestial, which includes the Nebula line, Soul Bell, Plucky, and Corvishire. A good chunk of our deck is searchable off this one card. Next, 3 copies of Plucky. Its stats are a swap of its Thunder counterpart, Elichic. On normal cast we search for Apollo, and Apollo itself can then Foretell 4 and start gaining advantage. We want to see Apollo as often as possible, so 3 Plucky is a must. Up next we have 3 copies of Corvishire. Whenever Corvishire receives a Solar Energy, we Foretell cards equal to the number of its enchanted spirits plus 1, meaning at minimum we'll look at 2 cards, place them back in whatever order we want, and then draw 1. And then we place a card from our hand onto the deck. A little bit of a circular motion, but it's another card that gives us a resource advantage while setting up our Foretell plays. Next, in order to cover our biggest weaknesses, is 2 copies of Lumaru. While its effect to mill our opponent with each attack could be nice outside of a Morfrost matchup, this card is really just here to throw hands with a nice big 5 attack. Searchable off First Light and Apollo, it just feels like a card that needs to be here until we get better options that have better synergy with the Foretell strategy and for dealing with beat sticks. Our last 2 Solars are 2 copies of Jatara. Jatara gives us a way to recycle our U-Spirits similar to Ambrosia. What's special about Jatara is that it's searchable and recurring as long as we can Nexus. I'm currently testing these out over Ambrosia just to see how it feels, but if I find that effect suppression is too strong, then this could easily be replaced by Ambrosias, or played alongside if you feel the deck is going through spirits too fast. Rounding out our Celestrals is our Thunder package. 2 copies of Elichic to get us to our Apollo, and 3 copies of arguably the best card in the game, Aster Rabbit. Moving on to our runes, we start off with 3 copies of First Light. This card places any Solar Celestial on top of our deck, either to set up Foretold plays or just to be our next top deck. In addition, Nebuleo can grab it off its own effect. Next we have our 3 Divine Runes, Apollo. You can disenchant to Foretell 3 and then add 1 Foretold Solar Celestial to hand. With Soul Bell in the field we can dig for 5 instead. Additionally, this card helps us buff up our Nebuleo and turn it into a beat stick. Onto our generic runes, we have 3 copies of Gorgons and 2 copies of Poison Tip. Gorgons is the best card in the game to me, and Poison Tip helps us weaken our opponent's Celestrals and cover up our own weakness. The deck space is pretty tight, otherwise I consider running a Tsunami here. Our last 3 slots go to Earthquake to take care of other beat sticks. A card I considered for the main deck was Resting Your Laurels, but what made me go against that idea is that Laurels requires us to control less enchanted spirits than our opponent, and our board usually looks something like this. It's a card that's great in the opening turns, but then becomes a Bricks of Swords in the later turns. You can technically dance around that by keeping it away from the top deck with your Foretell plays, but I think it's too risky to play in game 1. I would definitely side it, but it's hard to justify in the main deck. One alternate build I want to experiment with is based off the idea of Nebuleo being a beater. Similar to Earth Beatdown with Tectaris, this build would utilize 3 copies of Temple of the Sun and focus on being as aggressive as possible. Temple is our stadium and buffs the attack of every Celestial for each enchanted Solar Spirit. The main reason I'm not prioritizing this build is that Solar lacks proper back removal the way that Earth has Equal Links. While we do have Soul Stalks, it's a 2-drop versus Equal Links being a 1-drop, but the principle and ideal are still there. If there's more interest, I'd be happy to try the alternative out and showcase it. Side deck wise, the format is still too new to tell, but covering our weaknesses is 3 copies of Laurel and at least 2 copies of Lava to help clear the board and get out a big body. I'm excited to see where Daybreak takes us and the updates it makes to our previous decks with the support introduced. If there's any questions or ideas, let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer. Till next time, peace. later.